I did a record with Etta James, and it was the first time she told me this, that she'd ever sung live with the band. And this is after this was in 1990 something, so she'd been around for a long time, 40 years, making records, and I couldn't believe that she'd never sang with a band before. It doesn't really make sense to me. That didn't add up to me. Although singers often overdub parts and other tracks, it didn't make sense that she would do that. So I convinced her to sing with the band, and it was a tricky thing because that record, we were recording. It was a jazz record, and it was her first jazz record where she would sing jazz repertoire, and it was mostly ballads, and she just, she took super standard songs. My Funny Valentine, my God, I mean, how many girl singers does it take to sing My Funny Valentine? Apparently all of them, right? So when she said, I want to sing My Funny Valentine, I thought, oh no. And yet she did, and she made it her song. It was so great. But the point of the story is that we were making the record the first day, and the piano, I noticed in the second tune, and my engineer turned to me and said, what do you think about that piano? I said, I'm not thinking about the piano. He said, what do you think about it? So I started listening to the piano. I said, holy crap, the piano sucks. And I'd played the piano before when I came into the date, and I felt it was sharp, but it was consistently sharp. It's like almost like it had been tuned to A444 or something. But at least it was internally in tune. But basically what it was it just sounded like crap on tape. And we changed the mics around. But a lot of studio pianos are played so much that the hammers are beat to death. And so they get this very metallic, thin sound. They don't have the resonance of the overtones is lost. So the tonality, the tone is lost. And pianos are so different and so finicky. Everything affects pianos. So I stopped the date, and I said to her, I'd ask her to come in the dressing room, and I can remember kneeling down in front of her because I was so scared. And I said, Etta, I have some bad news. And she said, what? And I said, the piano is not good enough. The piano's not as good as you are. And she said, well, I really want to sing. And I said, and I really want you to sing, but I can't replace the piano part. We don't have the part. We don't have the isolation of it. So I really don't feel comfortable going forward on this. She says, what are you suggesting? I said, let's postpone the date until tomorrow, and I'll get the best piano. And I'd threatened the life of the studio owner already to get me the best piano. He said he had the best piano, and I believed him, but I know better. But he was a big-time guy, so I figured he knew. He didn't know. So she said, well, you're the producer. So I took the rap. So I spent $15,000 that day or whatever, $20,000, and I had to blow it off. But I had to pay the musicians, and I had to pay the studio, even though they screwed up in a sense. So the next day, it's a 2-day tracking date. So the next day, we had one more day to track a record. Well, I want you to know, I repositioned the people in the room. I made it more living room-like. It was a big, huge studio. Got rid of the overhead lights, put up some lamps, made it more of a living room setting. Comfort, comfort, comfort. Lots of flowers for the singer, other things, make it very special. And get the chair just right, everything's right. And she sang all the songs in 6 hours with the band, and that was that. And the next day we recorded one song with her and the guitar player, and we fixed 23 words, I remember that we counted, in the whole record, where she would just punch in the word. And that was it. So we made the record that won a Grammy and sold 250,000 records in 6 hours. And that's because everything was right. And it's because the musicians knew that if I'm going to cancel a record date because the piano is not good enough, they gotta respect that. And so when they came the next day, they were ready to go. There was nothing in the way, There was no. I didn't have to say, "Can I get your attention, please?" I had their attention. So it became a classic record.
What record was that?
Mystery Lady. That's the reason that record is so good is because it's all one thing. It is completely and utterly consistent. There's not one thing out of place. And I'm sure that the reason that is because it is one thing. It all happened in 6 hours. You know, everything was read, everything was just on the verge of peaking. You know, they say in a performance that you don't want to rehearse it too much where you peak in the rehearsal. You want to rehearse it just before you peak, and you peak in the performance. That's tough. That's really, really, really hard. But I think conductors will tell you that. You know, you've got to get it to the point where it's just about there, and bam, then it happens. And when music happens and it's magic, it's incredible. It's life-changing. Doesn't happen every time. Doesn't happen on every record. In fact, I think a lot of reasons that jazz is not so popular is because of a lot of bad records. You know, but if you listen to Kind of Blue, there's a record that's perfect. There's a record that's very consistent. The John Coltrane Ballad record, very consistent. You know, I don't know how long that was. It couldn't have been more a day or two that record was made, but it's just completely consistent. It's just beautiful. That's another desert island record right there, the Ballads record by Coltrane.